And just so the audience knows, not to bring it up and linger on it, but Keith, the thing that set this off, Keith, your fiance, was murdered. As I understand it, it was a workplace violence situation where somebody came and shot him while he was driving a truck, and multiple times he died. And then you actually testified at that criminal trial, which, my God, I mean, people already know you're strong. Like that takes a special level of strength while you're in that level of grieving to go testify at the trial, but you did it.
Well, Megyn, it's much of it is like a blur. And, you know, people often poo-poo lost recollection or recollection regained. But I can say that for a chunk of time before Keith's murder and a big chunk of time after his murder, I don't remember so much. The things I do remember, I was at school in a statistics exam, and I came out of the exam, and I remember it was so dark in the building, and I opened the doors going out. I was at Mercer University. I later went to Mercer Law School in NYU for my LLM in criminal and constitutional law. But at that time, I was just finishing my undergrad degree. And it was so dark in the building and so bright and beautiful and sunny. And I walked out and I stopped halfway, didn't have a cell phone, and used a payphone to call my job. I worked at the university library to say, I'm on foot. I'm going to be there. I'm 10 minutes late, but I'm coming. And they told me to call Keith's sister, Judy, and I knew then something was horribly wrong. And I remember, Megyn, that when I tried to dial the numbers, my hand wouldn't work. Have you ever seen a moth around the light outside, how it flitters around like that? I looked at my hand and that's what I couldn't get to the numbers, but I did get to them. And I don't know how, Megyn, but I knew. And she picked up the phone and said, where are you? And I said, is Keith gone?
Oh, wow.
I knew. And she said, yes. And after that, it was a blur. I dropped the phone and left it just hanging, as I recall. And I remember driving by our little Methodist church. There was nobody at home. Both my parents worked. I had just transferred back home to Mercer from where I met Keith in Valdosta. And I stopped at our church because I saw a car parked there. And I went in and my pastor was there, Dr. Oliver. And I said, Keith is dead. And I sat down at his desk. And then I decided, Megyn, that he wasn't dead, that he had been in a crash and he was alive. And if I could figure out where he was, I could get to him and I could fix it. And so suddenly I was in a hurry. And then I saw upside down reading, Billy wrote Bernstein Funeral Home. And then I knew. And that's what happened. And everything else was just kind of a blur. But yes, I hardly remember much about the funeral, except the pastor kept calling me Mary. And then I remember the trial. That was the first time I'd ever been in a courtroom. And I went in, and I don't remember this. My mother and father would take off of work and drive me every day. But I hardly remember that. And that was hard to get off of work.
A long drive, I understand.
Yeah, it was. It was a long drive, about 2 hours each way. And I got there, and everything was so quiet. I remember I had on my boots, my cowboy boots, and I could hear each foot going up the stand. The witness sat right beside the bench, elevated, and I spoke to the jury. And I remember coming down off the witness stand, and I looked at the counsel table, and I saw Keith's bloody shirt there. And I had not seen that before. And I kept walking, and I saw the defendant, and he looked at me, and then he looked down. He wouldn't look at me. And then I looked at his lawyers. There was a couple of lawyers sitting there, and they looked at me and they looked down. They wouldn't look at me. And I didn't know what any of that meant. And I walked out, I could hear my feet. And then the door shut behind me, and I don't remember anything else. But what happened to Keith is this. He had a summer job. He was a geology major, and his dad knew some guy that owned a construction company, and he had a summer job in construction way out in the middle of nowhere, very rural building, I guess a commercial building. And at lunchtime, they were so far away, somebody had to drive into town to get sodas, and Keith volunteered. As I recall it, the perpetrator, the killer, had been fired off the job and was angry. And Keith drove back in the company truck, and he opened fire and shot Keith 5 times in the face, the neck, and the head. Keith lived. He was an athlete. He had been on baseball scholarship, and he was alive when he got to the hospital, but then died. That's what happened.
Wow. The man who did it was convicted. And how long did he serve, and where is he now?
I remember I was at Court TV, and I can place it in about 90, oh gosh. I guess he did well over 20 years, but I had been on the air. I did the morning shift that morning for some reason and went back to my office, and I was looking out at 3rd Avenue. My office then was at the corner of 40th and 3rd. And I was reading emails that had been sent to me on the public forum. And somebody had written, "Did you know Keith's killer has been released?" I couldn't believe it. That's how I found out.
My God.
And I just remember I didn't even try to look it up. I just sat there and looked out at 3rd Avenue. So that would have been around 2000, I guess. Where is he now? I don't know. I don't know where he is now. I don't know if he's dead or alive. And would it matter? It won't change anything that happened.
It's amazing.
Except if I knew where he was, I might want to go kill him, Megyn, and then you'd have to defend me.
I would. I would do
it. And then
it.
I'd only see the twins on visiting day behind barbed wire.
Like, I can't imagine that. I do not have anything in my past that helps me relate to this, but the one sliver I can, because I had a very bad stalker at one point, and the guy wound up going behind bars and into a mental institution for 10 years. And, as the victim, quote, of his crime, they had to let me know when he got out. And I remember my stomach dropping. Like, you don't know what it means. Does it mean things are going to start back up again? Am I in danger? And I'm sure you had to at least think about that. Like, what, has he been in any way reformed? Is he still wrought with anger? He knows your name. You were not a public figure when you testified, but of course he knows your name. And then you went on to become a big star. So I'm sure it had to raise a lot for you.
What bothers me more is the people I put behind bars happily. And Megyn, I would look them right in the eye when they got dragged out of court. I mean,
love that about you.
No mercy. I don't care if it's attempted shoplifting or triple homicide. To hell with them. But what about my children? They're getting out now. I do think about that a lot. Yes. And that is honestly the one reason I can't go back to the business until they're off in college and away. I just can't put them and David, who's like the best person I've ever known. Well, maybe second to my dad and mom, but I can't put them in that kind of a danger.
Yeah, it's already risky enough just being a public person, never mind a public person who's putting criminals behind bars for a living. All these prosecutors, I feel for the ones who are making $33,000 a year in these local DA's office who are in danger. And unlike you today or me today, they cannot afford a security guard.
32,000
bucks. Yes.
At my height.
Yes.
32. Hence the
I believe it. No, this is why I didn't do it, because when I graduated law school in 95, I had $100,000 in debt, and I wanted to work in the Manhattan DA's office. I'm from New York State. and it was $35,000 a year, and I would have been below the federal poverty level. And then along came the big white shoe law firms, and they were like, here's $85,000. I was like, oh my God, that's a life-changing offer, And so I went the corporate route. It worked out in the end, but one of these days, don't be surprised if I leave the media business and there I am working in the Manhattan DA's office, prosecuting crime.
It was great, Megyn. It's great.
We were lucky to have you. The country was lucky. Georgia was lucky.
I would say one of the closest people to me now is my former investigator, because he saved my life, and for many other reasons. But we were out investigating a triple homicide that went down on a Sunday night around 11:30 in a housing project. And nobody wanted to be a witness, of course. And we were out during the day, which, of course, you're not going to find like dopers. They're like vampires. They wake up, at 3 and 4 in the afternoon. But we were out looking for a witness, and we went to one door, Megyn, and it was hot and bright outside during the investigation. And they were inside a dark apartment with a rusted screen door. That door opened. The first thing I saw was a double barrel pointing right at my face. Oh, wow. And he grabbed me, and we both dove off the side of the porch. And on another occasion, a defendant took a lunge at me in the courtroom, which I later, reinterpreted and put in a book. And my investigator was there to help me.
But one of the things I like about listening to your show is you bring back a lot of those folks from your prosecutorial career, and you go back over stories and you'll tell some of the stories. I remember one you told not too long ago was about, all I remember is you were talking about how you'd bring out a big jug of water in the courtroom, right? And make it muddy.
Great.
Right?
Yes.
That makes sense.
And I would have it sitting there on the table the entire trial next to the Bible, of course. And except the jug of water was a prop. I needed the Bible. But the jug of water at the beginning of the trial, I'd shake it and it would get all muddy, a big jar, like a big mason jar. And then in closing arguments, I'd shake it at the beginning and set it down and then go through all the evidence and talk about how it is the defense's job to muddy the water, to make it unclear. But once you focus on the facts and the law, everything becomes clear. And I would hold up the water that by the end of my hour-long closing argument had settled, right?
Negative dings on credit reports happen to all sorts of people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. Understanding the credit landscape can be extremely tough, and spending the time to dispute and repair these so-called dings can be a full-time job. Good luck to you if you already have one of those, or kids, or anything going on. For starters, you have to deal with 3 separate credit bureaus, which no one wants to do. It's also a common misconception that people with poor credit scores are just people who don't pay their credit card bills. They just simply don't want to do it. These actually can be hardworking folks who are negatively affected by divorce, identity theft, medical debt, student loans, or they just don't have the time or are too overwhelmed to fix it. But if you do not address negative credit items, they can haunt you for years to come. And when it counts the most, like when you're trying to get a mortgage at a competitive rate. The good news is our sponsor, Lexington Law, would like to help you. Go to lexingtonlaw.com and start today with a free consultation and review. Tell them Megyn sent you at lexingtonlaw.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.